Hello and welcome everyone to the World Unity Week Convergence Room of Meshworking Cities and Ecoregions. I'm Kara Stonehouse, your host from the Hague Center for Global Governance, Innovation, and Emergence. And in this room, we're gathering the thought leaders of our time who are thinking big about this theme, about what's it going to take, what will it take for this World Unity movement to become into reality. And so I'm really excited to have with us today Robert Schram and Troy Wiley, who are coordinators and co-founders of the WorldSummit movement, a very coordinated and coherent movement to get people together, all thinking about this together and moving into action. So welcome, guys. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. Thanks for inviting us, and happy to be here.
Yeah, why don't you take us into your presentation, and then afterwards we'll have some questions and discussions about it.
Yeah, Robert, did you want to say a little about the World Summit and Hack Humanity?
Well, can do. So the World Summit is a peaceful revolutionary movement. We're connecting, like Kara mentioned, and unifying thousands of groups worldwide who are working on converging and creating new operating systems. And so that's including new, entirely new self-governance and regenerative economic models. Hack Humanity is sort of a partnership between Envenienta, Open Source Everything, and the World Summit and partners. Hack Humanity and Envenienta are distributing blueprints for solutions on a global and local level. And we are focusing now with Hack Humanity on the superordinate goal, and that is to provide basic needs for every man, woman, and child.
Yeah, and we sort of view the Hack Humanity project as an action network. And so in a way, it's doing sort of what we've been trying to do with the World Summit, which is to transcend group identification, group egos, or founder egos, or you name it, and try to get the groups to come together and unify and work towards common causes. And that can be somewhat challenging because, as I said, a lot of groups have their own projects, their own identities, and that's fine. But at some point, we sort of need to drop all that and come together and unify. So that's sort of what the Hack Humanity project is. You can envision, well, we envision having hackathons at the cosmo-local level. So it's globally connected, but solving real solutions on the ground at on a local level. So just by way of giving you a little outline about what we're going to be talking about, we're going to start off by showing you two videos that we've put together that are, we think, very timely and aptly named the Great Pause video series. The first one is about a 5-minute video, and it's basically talking about this pause that we've been forced to take, or maybe gifted, to basically get us to reevaluate how humans organize and live on this planet, and can we do things differently. Then we'll show you a second video, The Great Pause Part 2, which is basically talking about how there is no going back to normal, or as we like to call it, the abnormal normal, and even if we wanted to. So we're in a whole different realm now, and everything has changed, including our activism, and that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to introduce an organizing framework that it's basically the 3 pillars of activism that was inspired by Joanna Macy a long time ago, and we feel like that's perfectly appropriate for transformative change. So then we're going to come back. We'll have a little, Q&A session if you want, discuss what we presented in the videos. Then we're going to show maybe a 10 or 15-minute slide deck presentation. We'll walk you through that, and then that builds on some of the concepts like the 3 pillars of activism, the mother of all hacks, and we'll get to that and explain what that means. So yes, I think if we can go ahead and start showing video 1, that'd be great.
At no other time ever in our lives have we gotten the opportunity to see what would happen if the world simply stopped. Here it is. We're in it. Stores are closed, restaurants are empty, streets and 6-lane highways are barren. A carless Los Angeles has clear blue skies as pollution has simply stopped. In a quiet New York, you can hear the birds chirp in the middle of Madison Avenue. Coyotes have been spotted on the Golden Gate Bridge. And because it is rarer than rare, it has brought to light all of the beautiful and painful truths of how we live. And that feels really weird, because it has never happened before. If we want to create a better world for our kids, we have to pay attention to how we feel right now. Even with an enormous number of people hidden away, not working, we can still get food on the shelves and keep the lights on. Has anyone else noticed how little is unavailable with so many people in isolation? The old normal was abnormal, and we all experienced the stress of our unsustainable system. Our society was based on artificial values that were traded on the stock market in a system which requires everyone to be slaving away, often doing redundant or unnecessary things to create productivity. Most of our constant spinning on the hamster wheel was pointless. It made fake value for fake money. This is an appropriate time for sacred anger, which can activate us to say, no, no more. The biggest thing the rich are afraid of is you figuring out that we could all be moving a lot more slowly and getting along just fine. An efficient society would burn a lot slower. No hustle. If our entire economy wasn't dependent upon perpetually creating infinite growth within clearly finite systems, like our biosphere and available resources, perhaps we wouldn't have to choose between growth and a huge number of people dying for that illusion. If we build a society based on what we need, instead of what the endless programming has conditioned us to believe that we want, we wouldn't be ravenously consuming through every resource and drowning in the waste left behind. We could have everything that we need and a whole lot more. Imagine we reduced ourselves to the jobs we need, a few we want, and shared the tiny amount of essential labor remaining so nobody works that much at all. Instead of 70% of people being canned up inside, they share the work being done by the essential workers now. We have enough people at this point and enough automation, which is growing rapidly, that nobody should need to work 8 or 10 or 14 hours a day. It's absolutely exploitive to be slaving away at these made-up bullshit jobs. We could see a world where a 15 to 20 hour week is standard and everybody has their needs met guaranteed. The illusion has been broken. So now, we call upon you to take the great pause as an opportunity to reflect and reconsider. Find value in yourself outside of your job and take back your time. Be rebelliously unproductive. Don't listen to the advocates of the abnormal normal when they call you back to the endless toil of business as usual. There is no usual anymore. Know that even when they tell you it's necessary, it isn't. We can support each other through mutual aid, and together we can be immovable. Instead of fear and worry, let's see this opportunity as a blessing in disguise, which can and will bring about a whole new level of freedom most of us have never experienced. This moment is a driver of the shift towards a better world for all. This is a revolution in lifestyle, a cultural paradigm shift. Stay tuned.
Yeah,
Just
it was
one
nice
second,
to
I'll be
see.
sure to pause here. Okay, So the paradigm shift from rushing around to being slow.
Yeah, I might be slightly biased when I say that my son did an excellent job of making this film and narrating it, Evan Wiley. So. And so he's also made the next one that we're going to show now. And in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to have The Great Pause Part 3 coming out. So, but yeah, we can go ahead and share the Part 2 now if you'd like.
COVID-19 has made a few things very clear. First, that our political and economic systems are not designed in the interest of human life. Second, that our environment is better off in the absence of commerce. And third, that our lifestyles are unhealthy and revolve too much around our jobs. Common among all of these revelations is that the underlying problems existed long before the COVID-19 pandemic. Before that, they manifested as conflicts in the Middle East, the refugee crisis, the Great Recession, the war on drugs, and climate change. What we are not seeing, or not willing to see, is that these catastrophes we find ourselves in are symptoms of our massively problematic socioeconomic system. They are not anomalies. These catastrophes will not stop until we address the underlying cause. In fact, these catastrophes will continue to get worse. Normal was the crisis, and that is why we cannot go back. We live in a world of great abundance, an abundance of land, food, shelter, and technology. Technology which is constantly increasing our capacity to produce said abundance. So why is it that so much of humanity lives in poverty? Why is it that 1 million tons of surplus rice and grain rot in silos? Why is it that hotels have enough vacant rooms to light up hearts, while the homeless are given taped-off slabs of concrete outside? And then, out of the blue, governments approve trillion-dollar aid packages and send checks to their citizens. It's proof that we have always been able to satisfy everyone's needs, but our inherently flawed system prevented it. It is the monetary market exchange system, its underlying philosophy and rules, that are the problem. Such a system survives by maintaining scarcity. Not only a scarcity of products to keep prices high, but scarcity as a lifestyle and as an economic mindset. Governments are pushing to reopen the economy because the economy depends on the working class, something else that's been revealed, but also because governments know that the working class can't afford to stay home. Yes, if we go to work, we might get and spread the virus, but if we don't go to work, we might starve. And we are seeing many people trying to exercise what minimal choice they have in a way that preserves some sense of dignity or honor. They are going back to work to put food on the table, unwilling to see themselves as victims. We want to call these people ignorant or irresponsible, but let's be clear. Fellow members of the working class are not the enemy. It is now apparent that one of the main reasons COVID-19 spread so rapidly is because governments, such as those in the United States and China, played down and even arguably covered up the severity of the coronavirus because they knew it was politically and economically devastating. It is no wonder that these countries were hit the hardest. Public healthcare and education, institutions that protect and empower the population, have been overlooked for decades. Governments are playing the only game they know how to play, one where resilience and sustainability are sacrificed for efficiency and productivity. We've seen this play out before, but on a much larger scale. Climate change. We have known about it for decades, and there have been almost no substantial systemic changes to address it. Conspiracy theories and disinformation peddled by the political and economic elite attempted to delay the inevitable. Both of them working together and working just as they were designed at our expense. We know that a growing economy corresponds directly to worsening environmental conditions. And now we also know that an economy on pause corresponds directly to improved environmental conditions. The normal we would return to was one that was already headed towards catastrophe. We must not return to normal because normal was the crisis. This begs the question, if not back to normal, then where? If not capitalism, then what? To answer that, we can look at the 3 pillars of activism by Joanna Macy. One way that we can identify what the alternatives are and how we get there. We must be willing to build new systems, facilitate shifts in consciousness, and prevent further harm in the meantime. All 3 pillars are critical, and no one form of activism will do the trick. The situation we are in now is essentially a case study, and a shift in consciousness is already occurring. The global test case has proven, for example, that our current systems are fragile, that we are capable of radically changing our lifestyles almost immediately, and that most of our jobs are non-essential. Not only do we spend an excessive amount of our lives working these jobs, but many contribute nothing to society. Many are superfluous, not created out of a need or demand or the well-being of humanity for that matter, but out of the desire to extract value. Value, most of which goes to the capitalist, not the worker. Here we are labeling jobs otherwise underpaid and undervalued by society as essential. This is why we need a massive values reassessment. COVID-19 is allowing us to realize that the true value is first and foremost in meeting our basic needs. It is in safety and belonging, connectedness with nature, ourselves, and our community. Having the time and energy to address these global challenges, however, is especially difficult for those they affect the most. Those who don't have the luxury of seeing beyond their most essential daily needs. This is why holding actions are so important, as they address those immediate needs and prevent worsening conditions for the most vulnerable populations. Climate strikes, rent strikes, supporting food banks, providing housing, universal healthcare, and education would all be considered holding actions. A universal basic income, something we've seen implemented during the lockdown in countries around the world, is also a holding action. It holds governments responsible for helping to meet the basic needs of citizens. It could be a crucial step in the process of building a new, better alternative, because by meeting everybody's basic needs, we can break free from that oppressive, artificially generated cycle of scarcity and begin to think about the future. Holding actions make the revolutionary transformation accessible. However, they would be endless and futile if there weren't also people working to address the root causes of such inequities. The 3rd pillar is to build new political and economic systems. Part of shifting the consciousness is to break from this rigid dichotomy of capitalism versus communism, democracy or autocracy. There is, in reality, a whole world of possibilities, with historical precedent and evidence to back them up. Many activist groups are now organizing to align and synchronize their efforts, because they too see and understand there are so many great regenerative ideas that make sense. We must be willing to embrace them, knowing that the status quo just won't do. A universal basic income paired with a 20-hour work week can help us transition to something even more prosperous, like an open access economy, where we shift from ownership to stewardship, having access to basic goods and services whenever and however we need them, without a price tag, finally benefiting collectively from the abundance our world provides. As COVID-19 has proven, we are able to maintain essential infrastructure, even with far less people going to work. We were all forced into the great pause, but now, as they beckon us, we have a choice, knowing more clearly than before just how empowered we are. We could dismantle our degenerative systems simply by us choosing not to go back. No problem can be solved with the same consciousness that created it. We are in a raging river, scared and holding on to a branch, battered by the rapids. Only when we recognize that our system of government and our economic systems are not only outdated, but flawed in their design, can we let go, scary as it may be? Or we can take solace in the fact that we have somewhere to go, things to do, and that is designing a new system that makes the existing one obsolete. We are already in the chrysalis, so to speak. That much is true. Now, whether we emerge a beautiful new creation is up to us. Stay tuned.
Beautiful. It just seems so obvious somehow, but it's so inspiring. It needs to be said and told the story, because it's not obvious to everyone yet, you know.
Right. Yeah, the pull is so strong to go back to the only normal that we've ever known. And yet we're being called to really think entirely differently about everything. So that's what we're trying to tap into there.
Yeah, and also make it visible. That's very important. So we can support people to sort of, understand what actually, how they can sense into it, and they can understand the systematic root causes and how much energy we are spending with fighting symptoms, which is okay. I mean, every action group is doing great work, but the problems will keep on coming back if we don't address these root causes. So,
Yeah.
and that's been a great journey. That's been a great journey to discovering this within with me and Troy and the others, the core team of the World Summit movement, and all the other groups, and seeing what is evolving now. So.
Yeah, some people say whoever has the best narrative will win the hearts and minds of the people, and create the system. So I think it looks like that's what this film is capable of contributing to.
Yeah.
And as I alluded to, we're a video part 3 is in the works, and that's going to put the spotlight on the Black Lives Matter movement, because what they are successfully doing is enacting activism in all 3 pillars of activism.
Oh, nice.
So they're definitely changing they're shifting the consciousness in terms of just starting to question what the role of police is in our society, and the fact that it's a relatively, centralized police units are a relatively recent invention. It goes back 150, 200 years, and that it's been historically about controlling people, or the oppressed people, or slaves even. So now with the whole defund the police movement, it's like radically getting us to think entirely different about everything. And then, what does that lead us to? Like, then we start questioning defunding the military, defunding prisons, and then what could we do with that money? Perhaps shift it to, human care functions instead, right? Instead of degenerative, we're putting that money towards regenerative human purposes, right? And so,
switch that switch to flowing, all the money flowing to symptoms to all the money flowing to the root cause.
Exactly.
It's not all of it, obviously. The model is good. I really like to see that, because sometimes I think, oh, what's the point of protesting, or how are we ever going to change the system? But when you can see them all working together as a whole, then you go, okay, they're protesting, and I'll support them and contribute to it, because it's part of this whole work that we're doing. I like that.
Yeah. So of course they're firing on the holding actions pillar, street protests, etc. And we've just discussed the shifts in consciousness, but it's actually leading to some tangible changes within our system. Some city councils around the US now are actually, deliberating on whether to actually defund the police or abolish the police even. So that gets into some radical system change that, a year ago, we've had Black lives being brutalized and killed for years, and we haven't done anything about that. And now the whole narrative is changing, as you mentioned. And so yeah, we want to really highlight the Black Lives Matters as an example of how we can enact transformative change in all three pillars. Now imagine if and that's been the problem historically with a lot of protest movements. They all had their role and they did some good work, but going back to Occupy movement or Standing Rock, et cetera, they were mostly focused on symptoms and stopping the harm right then and there, which is great, but they didn't go far enough in terms of actually shifting consciousness and shifting to new systems. So imagine if we could get all these different groups to unify around that.
Yeah.
Do you have a question?
Yeah.
No, kind of a question also, but what this example that you've just given and what the video sort of spoke to me, what is highlighted in it was this shift of power, and your example with Black Lives Matter is kind of how that power is shifting, right? And a lot of the work that also you're doing, I think, is in highlighting that shift of power and how is that happening, because a lot of the story has been about the power and where it lies and how it manifests itself. And and so it's really important, I think, through these videos and through the work that you're doing to highlight how that shift in power kind of happens and how that so this new narrative of taking the power and using this collective wisdom and the collective sort of work to create a new center of power. And that, I think that narrative and that story really stands out for me in the whole thing.
Robert, would you?
Yeah, thanks, Sweta. It really leans into self-empowerment, and I think we want to make that visible also. These energy shifts, they're happening all the time. It can also work the other way around, by the way. It's not only about, it doesn't always have to start with holding actions or protesting groups. It also can come from another pillar, that a sort of energy or change phase shift is initiated or activated. So it could be something in a new system, or something that raises the consciousness that makes people follow up on holding actions. But and we really want to focus that on the fact that we most likely are focusing on these problems because the established systems we have, so the economic and governance systems, they are pretty much outdated, and now we feel that we can step into an era of self-empowerment, self-regulation, also self-governance. And of course, there are many other ways of running an economy. In Greek, it just means that you run your household in a responsible way. And we probably all feel that we haven't been doing that lately. Troy?
Yeah, regarding your question, I think that's a great question, Sweta, about power. And yeah, I think we're always advocating for self-empowerment and self-governance, et cetera. And you can use the terminology of taking power back, but even that's sort of a rivalrous type of situation. For millennium, we've had this us versus them struggle over power, this fighting, the haves and the have-nots, the powers that be against the common people. And I think it's time to basically transcend that fighting dynamic altogether. So it's not about physically fighting and taking back power. It's actually about dissolving power. And I've written about that in my book, where I basically talk about, instead of fighting, we need to dissolve power. And there's ways that we can do that. And as we reach the critical mass, which Robert's always saying we've already reached the critical mass, or what Paul Hawken talked about, the blessed unrest, right? and it's just not activated yet. So once we do that, boom, I mean, there's no taking of power, it just suddenly shifts.
Yeah.
And
I wonder, sorry, I wonder if you mean more than dissolving power, but more like distributing, because you still need that power of like that organization, that decision making, that like it's, but it maybe just spreads out more than like it can't disappear, because then we just have chaos, right? How would you respond to that?
It's decentralized, it's distributed, it's autonomous, you know, autonomous collectives that find their own power on the global and local level, right? So it's not centralized power. So yeah, what I refer to as geo-tribal. In other words, it's a global, but we have, you know, tribal relationships where that power is more distributed and egalitarian, I guess.
Yeah, perhaps it's also good to mention that, I mean, we don't feel like the current systems are bad or anything, right? It brought us great things, prosperity, technology, and infrastructure that is very efficient. So, well, it could be more efficient, but it's there. So it doesn't mean that we have to throw, you know, the baby out with the bathwater and we have to abandon everything. No, we just can use the good things that we have. And yeah, can take a closer look into what are the root causes.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's surprising, like you think, well, maybe since the structure's so rigid, we have to destroy it all. But then sometimes you're so surprised, you're like, no, just one different person came in power or one different policy came in, and then something kind of dominoed, and then a really big change happened, like smoking ban across the world or something, just kind of happened all at once. And a lot of people were working in the background for a long time to sort of make that happen. So,
Exactly. And you never know. I mean, before COVID-19, who could have imagined this shift? You know, you just have to experience it. It's very hard to explain if something like this is happening, right? I mean, we all have to go through it, and nobody really knows, of course, what the outcome will be. And that's also exciting. And it also offers, it can be scary, of course. Some people might find themselves in a place that they have distrust or anything, but it also opens up the room for a lot of positive solutions and change. So,
and maybe you remember seeing that once visual we showed of Game A and Game B, and there's some very smart people around the world that are in this Game B community that is really establishing some parameters or criteria by which we need to start shifting to those parameters. And in doing so, then we can create this regenerative paradigm. So for example, you know, there's this whole concept of a rivalrous, right? And, you know, I remember Daniel Schmachtenberger said that, you know, when you have exponential technology combined with win-lose rivalrous dynamics, it's a system that self-terminates, right? But we've got to get that right. We have to switch to regenerative, anti-rivalry, and win-win dynamics. There's a whole list of criteria that we can start questioning, you know, matching up against our current systems and say, does this meet all of this criteria? And so what that all points to is a post-capitalism. It is perhaps a post-monetary world. And as radical as that sounds, that's the direction that we're moving towards, zero marginal cost society that Jeremy Rifkin talks about. So, and other luminaries have talked about this, like Buckminster Fuller for decades, and Jacques Fresco, et cetera. So we are proposing, based on all of this anti-rivalrous criteria, an open access economy. And some have referred to it as a resource-based economy. So we can talk more about that in our slide deck.
yeah. So with the slide deck, we want to lean into the question, what is needed to mobilize a world unity movement? And well, we already covered quite some points, but I think it's okay if we can do it again. Or
Do you have
see
any
what
more
comes up.
questions, or would you like to go into the slide deck?
Yeah, let's go and you can like highlight and visualize those concepts, then we can talk a little bit more. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
So let me find it here. Here it is. Okay. Okay, let me know when you can see this.
Yeah.
Okay, let me get all the things out of the way here. Okay, so we just watched the Great Pause video part 1 and 2, and so we can see how that, you know, now there's like what we'll refer to it later as there's BC 19 and AC 19, sort of like, you know, before Christ and AD, you know, our current era, right? So basically in BC 19, everything is different, including our activism. So let's see, Robert, did you have some stuff you wanted to start with?
Yeah, I wanted to lean into John Lennon's Imagine song and get these vibes a bit, you know. So let's imagine the following, that the energies that we now see and experiencing are speeding up even more, and actually critical mass has been reached. And that will lead to barriers breaking away very soon. And governments will probably have big and great difficulties to control everything. So they will probably lose their grip on things. And if people will start protesting worldwide by not going back to normal, I think, and they start walking away from the current systems, then everything is possible. And we can really see, probably you can see people demanding radical change. And I feel we already can see that the systems themselves are sort of breaking down. So due to COVID-19, but also the climate crisis was already there. And there were already other things going on. You know, I feel that the current systems were able to be maintained so long because we had the bandwidth. We just had the bandwidth to sort of keep on doing it. And now this bandwidth is gone. So, and that's a positive thing. We need to rethink a lot of things. And yeah, but how are we going to do this?
So, yeah, we're all aware of Greta Thunberg, and, you know, for a year or 2 years now, she's been basically talking about with the climate crisis, our house is on fire. And you could even go as far as saying there's children, you know, there's children inside their house and the house is on fire. So we need to just drop our differences, pick up buckets of water and go put the fire out, right? So this situation is different with the COVID-19. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, how our focus needs to shift now because of it. And so it's our systems. We are seeing the pandemic has shown us how fragile our systems are with the global supply chain and just-in-time inventories, and just the entire jobs-based paradigm is fragile and is basically breaking apart. And so we need to, well, anyway, so there's, as I said, there's a strong pull to go back to the abnormal normal. But instead, in a sort of a metaphorical sense, maybe we need to let this fire burn our systems and not the people. Let's take care of our people, but the systems are breaking down, and so we need to create entirely new systems.
Yeah.
So, Robert?
Yeah, before COVID-19, we could see this, right? This was the approach, and still is, by the United Nations. And they call it the Sustainable Development Goals, 17 goals to transform your or our world. In our view, it's a step in the right direction. But actually, all these development goals are, again, pointing towards symptoms, solving symptoms. So we don't really feel they are really sustainable. they're not addressing the root causes. And I think that's important. I also think that we want to put the spotlight on a few of these goals. You can see here Sustainable Development Goal 8. That's creating decent work and economic growth. Well, we can see what's happening now. Millions of people are laid off in the US and all around the world, losing their jobs and income. So that's not going very well. And Development Goal 9, that's about infrastructure in the industry. We can already see that the infrastructures are also starting to show cracks. In the US, for instance, there are farmers who raise cattle, and they sort of have to dispose of a lot of their cows because they cannot get the meat actually to the shops because the infrastructure is not laid out on it. It was laid out on delivering these products to restaurants, and the restaurants are closed. So you can already see how fragile that system is. And of course, we can see that Sustainable Development Goal 17 is very important right now, creating partnerships for the goals. It's now time to organize and to spark this critical mass shifting. Troy?
Yeah, so what we're proposing is that we need to rethink these SDGs, and let's start calling them RDGs, Regenerative Development Goals. And, based on, a lot of people are talking about this, quality of life values and metrics, and instead of GDP, et cetera. And the main goal, you can take all of the 17 things and actually I like the point that Robert's made before, is that you really can't separate out all of these 17 goals because they're all, from a holistic point of view, they're all connected, interrelated. So it doesn't really do any good if you do try to separate them out, and then that puts you in a position of addressing symptoms rather than solving all of this from a holistic point of view. So if we look at it, all that can just sort of go out the window, and let's just say meet basic needs. That's what is important for how humans organize ourselves. Nothing else matters if we can't meet our basic needs and do so in a sustainable and regenerative way that doesn't destroy our own habitat, right? So that, what we're basically talking about is a new superordinate goal. If you're not familiar with that term, I believe, I don't remember, might have been Don Beck or somebody that coined that term. That basically means it's a goal that's big enough to rally and unify all these disparate, disconnected people and groups to come together to work towards a common, unified goal. And so that's what we're thinking is the superordinate goal in this case is meet basic needs of every man, woman, and child everywhere, immediately and beyond. And we've absolutely have the technology and the resources to do that. We're just not doing it, and because of all the inherent problems within our systems right now. So this is we call this our collective moonshot. So when JFK said we're going to the moon back in the 60s, that rallied everybody to come together to do what people thought was impossible, and out of that it created whole new technologies and new consciousness. Once you can actually go to the moon and look back at the Earth, maybe what do they call that? The overview effect or something?
The overview effect, yeah.
Yeah, so it shifts our consciousness to be able to look back at the Earth from the moon. So this is what we're referring to as our collective moonshot. And Marilyn Hamilton with Integral Cities has basically said a superordinate goal is the anchor, attractor, or an energizer for the emergence of a global meshwork. And we agree. So in that sense, the COVID-19 could actually be viewed as a gift to humanity. If we go back to normal, that's basically, we're committing suicide. At the risk of being overly dramatic, I don't think we are. Robert?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what Hack Humanity is suggesting now, to go for this superordinate goal, so we can organize and bundle all this energy that's out there. We're also referring to open access economy, and we can share a little bit later about it. But I think Hack Humanity is really suggesting this neutral umbrella concept, and that's really a rallying point for us. And we can radically shift and change, as we've seen with COVID-19. So why not do it? We also want to talk a bit about, well, it's not about the climate crisis, indeed. It's about basic needs. There are so many problems you can solve if every woman, man, and child, and even animals, I'm not saying they're less important, but if they get their basic needs, a lot of problems will be disappear just like that. But okay, let's not make it too beautiful, the story. We're not here to sell a story. So we want to use Hack Humanity and the 3 pillars of activism as this neutral framework to explain it, as you've seen in the video, to people and to make the next steps. Troy?
So, yeah, we're not talking about ignoring climate change at all. We're talking about actually getting to the root cause of climate change, as well as the pandemic and our inability to address either of those major crises. But there's also, let's not forget, there's crises with deforestation, with ocean acidification, Amazon forest is being burned down, had all those fires in Australia not too long ago. So there's crises in basically every one of our life support systems globally. And so we need to get to the root cause, which is our socioeconomic system. And more urgently, I mean, we're talking like we need to, as our supply chain continues to break down, as jobs go away, it's not unheard of. It's not utopian to think that we will need to provide UBIs, universal basic income, to everybody soon, because how else are they going to survive? And so we're talking about, you know, right now we're basically saying, instead of regenerative development goals, let's call them regenerative distribution goals. There is no way. One thing our partner group Invienta is working on is a platform. Well, their platform already has this capability where we can start connecting local farmers. Let's say a farmer that's growing potatoes, but you can't find that farmer now because everyone's buying from the grocery store. So there, and the farmer is distributing directly to retail, you know, grocery stores, et cetera, or food companies, and then it's distributed from there. So we need a totally relocalized approach, and we need the technology that can basically connect local CSRs and farmers with the people who need those products. Instead of, as Robert was talking about, instead of throwing away milk, pouring it out, or letting food rot, or culling herds, because pigs and cows, because, you know, we just can't get it to the people that need it. So that's, again, showing the fragility of our systems. So so what we're talking about, this is, if we do what is necessary to meet the superordinate goal of providing for everybody's basic needs, then we are automatically, well, in order to do that, we will actually have to create what we call an open access economy. And that is, instead, you know, everybody owning one of everything, and what we don't really want ownership of things. What we want is access to those things. So imagine a hammer that sits in a toolbox for 80% of its life, or even cars sit parked for 80% of their life, right? And so we can create high levels of access by basically sharing and giving open access to what everybody needs. And a good way to start that is with the universal basic income. But even that we see as a transitionary step, because there's all kinds of problems that come along with that, with inflation, et cetera. But let's start talking then about UBS, universal basic services, where we start making public transportation free. And that's something like Luxembourg has done that with their transportation. And, universal basic needs. So we just start taking care of each other, call it a gift economy. Don't call it bartering, because that's old and antiquated. That's still a form of exchange that has inherent problems. But we're talking about just taking care of each other's needs. And we can do that through mutual aid support networks that have already popped up during the coronavirus. And so what we are pointing to, again, is this is a post-capitalism that's, we've got to free ourselves up from thinking that there's only two possibilities, either capitalism or communism. We can get much more creative than that and basically transcend capitalism altogether and create anti-rivalrous, win-win socioeconomic systems that work for everybody. And so please check out open access economy, or what's been called a resource-based economy. There's a TED talk from Colin Turner entitled, "What If Everything Were Free?" And there's a lot of different resources. If you go to this wiki page and check out, wrap your heads around an entirely new system that is beyond poverty, politics, and war. So,
Yeah.
and so Envienta, our partner group, has already had experience in working with hackathons. They helped address the water crisis in South Africa a few years back. And I think that problem actually took care of itself. I guess they got a lot of rain, or, anyway, the problem kind of dissipated, so they didn't actually need to do a hackathon, but so they've got some actual experience in setting it up, and that's fantastic. So we envision doing that same kind of thing to address all the problems everywhere on a local level again. However, let's not forget that the water crisis, like the food crisis, like all the other crises, are symptoms. So we can't keep addressing, keep trying to hack the symptoms over and over again. That's why we're talking about the mother of all hacks, and that is hacking the root causes.
Yeah, thanks, Troy. You can see here that this was the World Summit movement approach before COVID-19. We were taking a look at all the 12 sectors of society, of the wheel of co-creation from Barbara Marx Hubbard. And sort of reviewing in every sector, what are the solutions, the best ideas, and organizing conferences about the topics, and also hackathons. And now we see that things have really changed dramatically. So in this paradigm shift that's already has started, we also have to shift with it, not only as activists, but as humans. So we need to follow that thread, I think. And yeah, there are some sectors that are very important and that are having a greater influence on the whole. You can see here that the governance sector and the economics and trade sector, they affect all the other sectors mainly. So that's why we are also focusing on those sectors. And I think that, yeah, that's mainly what we see happening now. And maybe you want to go to the next slide, Troy, what's happening.
Yeah, did you mention Barbara Marx Hubbard, Robert?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I was zoning out there, but yeah, so this is an evolution of her work, which has been fantastic. But again, yeah, we need to evolve the whole concept of the wheel of co-creation, or the 12-sector map, and basically show how we see that, for those that are familiar with integral philosophy, we've done another slide deck called Integral World Summit, about humanity's phase change. And we basically showed the 4 quadrants. You've got the inner and the outer, and then you've got the individual and the collective. And so the lower right is, upper left is the consciousness, upper right is the behaviors, so it's external, and lower left is the relationships or culture, and so that's collective. And the lower right is that's the systems quadrant. And the way that we see it is that we've created a dominator quadrant, the lower right systems quadrant. And that includes all of our systems, mainly our governance and economic systems that have, we make fun, we say we've created a monster. And true, we as individuals have created that, but now that our systems have come to dominate us, and has negative ramifications in all other quadrants and all aspects of life, and to a detrimental effect. So it's no longer reasonable to just say that governance and economics are equal sectors among all the other sectors. I think we need to sort of pull them out as a dominator hierarchy or a higher holon. If you're not familiar with the term holon, it's basically just means something that is simultaneously both a whole and a part. So it's just a more holistic view. And so if we take that perspective, then we need to address the higher holon, which is our socioeconomic systems themselves, to get to the root cause. So again, we're talking about, this leads us to an open access, self-governance, socioeconomic system. And so we can talk about this being utopian, or it'll never happen in our lifetimes, to which I say, well, bullshit, because we have to do something radically crazy right now. And as I've said before, that when the biopsychosocial conditions become great enough, what once was considered radical becomes practical. So the reality is there's been people like Buckminster Fuller and others that have been talking about these ideas forever, right? So now these ideas are just, they've been laying around, they've been thought through, and now it's time to start implementing those. And we'll discuss how we can start doing that shortly here. Robert?
Yeah. You can, so our journey within the movement was basically shifting also from the 12 sectors. And sort of, basically what we've done, we took the 3 pillars of activism and put it as an overlay on top, or as a setup to complete the whole picture. And I think for us that was a very important process. And we feel that it's certainly not utopian. It's very feasible and possible to go for this superordinate goal together, provide those basic needs for everyone. And you can see here with Otto Scharmer's quote, in a nutshell, the moment we focus our global attention to one single issue, then there is nothing we cannot do. And I think that's yeah, a very good takeaway.
Yeah, we're not saying that Greta Thunberg was wrong to focus on the climate crisis. In fact, it's all part of our evolution, right? And this is an evolving consciousness regarding COVID-19. So, however, I think it's safe to say that it was not an effective superordinate goal, and it could not rally the people to come together and make the change that we needed to seriously address climate change. And there's all kinds of reasons for that, but the bottom line is it was not an effective superordinate goal. We think that providing for everyone's basic needs is, because who doesn't want to feed their children? Who, doesn't want to have a safe environment for their family? Who does not want to be able to walk out on the streets without fear of being attacked by police or beaten because of the color of your skin? So we're talking about basic needs, including, well, we'll come to that in a second here. We'll show a different view of the base hierarchy of needs. And so this is, again, we showed this in the video. The holding actions we've already discussed. Black Lives Matter is becoming a great case study of how a movement like that can be effective in all 3 pillars. And of course, the Great Pause 2020 is that what we're in now. And what's next is creating new systems to address the root cause. And so we're basically envisioning this phase change for humanity, which is basically an epochal leap to an entire new paradigm based on a regenerative operating system, which is an open access economy and self-governance model. And with that, we have radically improved sense-making and choice-making. I think we can pretty much all agree that right now our sense-making and choice-making is horrible. And we can do all this year. And indeed we need to. So, Robert, what were you going to add about this?
Well, of course, Black Lives Matter is a perfect example how the energies flow, and we just talked about it briefly in these 3 pillars. So, and because of what happened with the passing away of Floyd George, and of course the riots that came out of it, the protests, that really brought about new dynamics. And you can see very good with what is happening now that this Black Lives Matter group is now flowing through affecting all 3 pillars. I think they are successfully crossing over that what seems to be not possible for other groups in the past. We have seen a lot of groups protesting, and we have seen a lot of other activities in the other pillars. But as far as we can see, this is the first time that withholding actions, there's really a crossover to the other pillars, so we can see systematic change. Maybe Troy, you want to add something about the shifts in consciousness and how we just talked about it, how the police is being defunded by this, right?
Yeah, I think I've already covered
most
of that. So, Robert, we can continue on with this one.
Yeah, so this is the pyramid of the hierarchy of needs from Maslow, and we can see that basically this is what we need, right? On the left, we need physiological safety, we need housing, we need food and water, and we also need psychological needs and self-fulfillment needs. That leads to self-esteem and self-actualization. And what is on the right is that we're showing is how we can do it. We can create well-being for all, and this by not going back to normal. And we can do it with the subordinate goal, providing these basic needs for every man, woman, and child in the next 3 or 4 months. Very ambitious. And I think this will also slow down climate change and regenerate the biosphere, as we have seen and shown in the videos. And we can create self-governance and regenerative economic models to lead, eventually, we can see this as stepping stones leading towards an open access, trade-free sharing economy. And there's a nice quote here from Daniel, and maybe Troy, you want to finish with that.
Yeah, we need new systems of governance that are not any system of governance the world has ever done so far. We need totally new systems of economics, new systems of education, healthcare, and all the way down to, at the individual level, a new basis for identity and values, where we realize we are not fundamentally separate from nature and each other. So, I mean, that is both a spiritual idea as well as practical, you know, and pointing to what we're capable of doing, what is actually possible. And so here's some links. You can check out more of our work, some other slide decks, our partner Envienta, open source everything. And please join us at hackhumanity.net, and we have a Facebook group as well. So in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have the Great Pause Part 3, which we might call, you know, we've been taking this great pause, which has been very important and critical for us collectively to reflect on where we are in the world. At some point, we need to, instead of taking an in-breath, we need to take an out-breath and start taking action. And that's what we're going to be pointing to in our future work. And right now, we've talked about some of these regenerative development goals. And Robert's actually put these in a timeline where we can start, looking at some of these actions from the 3 pillars of action and what we can do in each one of those pillars, and sort of lay those out in a timeline where we can actually coordinate campaigns and actions that will have much more powerful effects and making change. So anyway, where am I here? Let's go. So Robert's put this together, and we just, if we go to, let's say, what is it, August 27th. Yep. So like here, for example, universal basic income would be a great first thing to enact. And that means we're probably going to have to demand it. And we can do that with a coordination of all the holding action protest groups. And that's something that's going to be absolutely necessary to meet everybody's basic needs as the systems continue to break down. And so that the correlating shift in consciousness that goes along with that is that we can end this false poverty that we have never been able to get rid of. And it's getting even worse now. And the systems change that goes along with that is that this can be a stepping stone or transitionary. Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot to call it. These are all what we call transition tactics. So there's tactics that we can actually organize and lay out and schedule and coordinate in all 3 pillars. So we can move towards an open access economy, and the RDG, regenerative development goal, would be to, basically provide basic needs for everybody, which frees up their consciousness and their ability to think more constructively and creatively. And that should be just an inherent condition of being a human on this planet, is that we should all meet basic needs. So there's a whole list of various things we can do here.
Repurpose empty buildings and houses.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things. So we'll be laying this out more as we clarify it. But there's some very real practical things that we can start doing right away.
Yeah.
I think that's it. I'll stop sharing my screen here. Thank you for letting us take the time on that presentation. So.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I saw the last question. Yes, the timeline will be available, but we just finished the script for the 3rd video. And so we have to finalize it still. It's not fully complete, but we're almost there.
And yes, somebody said, is this timeline available to view later? Yeah, so everything that we do is open source, open access. So no proprietary ownership of intellectual ideas here.
No.
And it's kind of a catalog of possible actions, not necessarily a schedule of events, right?
Yes, correct. It's very, very loose and free-flowing and evolving. It's nothing, but it's, we're actually just starting to do the legwork on putting some of these ideas out there as possible transition tactics. And I'm sure we haven't even opened this up to many people yet, but we will, and I'm sure we're going to get a tremendous number of new ideas and tactics.
Yeah.
But to answer your question also, Carol, it could be a schedule, if a group of 1,000 very passionate, intelligent people come together, you can roll out a planning for it, of course.
The thing that's sort of blinking at me the most when I see your model, knowing sort of from where I'm coming from and you guys being right there, I feel like the way you're framing it and the way you're organizing it that it's very fundable. Like I feel like kids are here. I feel like a government could get behind this as an experimental beginning project. I feel like large corporations could get behind this as one of their sustainable projects. And so the potential here, I mean, and I know the energy is really coming from the people and that, but to host that hosting function, it's grounded and clear. And that's something I think a lot of people struggle with in this space. So I just really want to commend you on that. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yes,
Thank
it
you.
is. We hope that it's grounded, but it also, we use the term new paradigm, right? So any funder or governmental agent that steps forward basically has to recognize that what we're talking about is an entirely new paradigm shift. And so any philanthropist that might want to help, the ROI, return on investment, in this case, is a better world. It's not a monetary ROI. It's not about profiting. It's not about owning something in a proprietary nature so that you can profit off of it. We're basically trying to flip the entire paradigm. So that's something that, yeah, if you care about the future of your children or grandchildren, then any sane, grounded person should be behind this.
I feel those are very nice, good closing words. But I'll leave it up to Kara and Sweta.
Well, I want to open it if Shweta and Echo want to ask any questions or make a comment.
Some great work there, guys. Thank you so much for articulating the seemingly inevitable and way overdue, and perhaps more people are ready for this. I was curious about I guess, here, I'll turn the video on. I'm a friend of Ted Schulman, I guess. Do you guys work with him? I know he's working on World Summit stuff. He's a technocrat and sort of a metaphysical, guru out in New York City. But yeah, he's clued me into a lot of some of the global conversation stuff. Where do you see I guess the leverage, the power play that needs to happen? There needs to be sort of a critical mass of demonstrating that it works in a longer sense for those who might just diversify some small percentage of their portfolio, but really that for some of us, we've been all in on this new world, and for other folks, they'll kind of view it as a experiment for kind of tip their their toe into the pond. Now that we're at this great shift moment, and as I think from what I caught of the display, really shows that we're at sort of a cusp moment. Where do you feel like the power leverage could be for being able to reward those who are on the inside and decide to commit resources to future generations, or however the standards roll out?
Robert, thank you for the question.
Yeah. Well, there are several aspects we can put a light on here. I mean, I think what's already been happening for the last few decades, a lot of people were already sensing that something was not really working for them. A lot of people experienced stress, money problems. A lot of things were already brewing there. So this critical mass, like mentioned in the presentation, is already here. It's just nobody was really probably able to make it visible where the energies are and how to connect them. And we are trying to do our best with it. But of course, this is just one way of showing things. So from that perspective, I think it's huge, the power, the potential that is there. And once it starts shifting, and it already has started, I feel we just want to speed it up so we can get there faster, probably. Yeah, but from an incentive and maybe if I understood your question rightly, like politicians or companies, maybe Troy, you want to allude to that a bit.
Yeah, so my guess is that the leverage that you're talking about is not going to come from our politicians and from our economic elite. and from corporations necessarily. It may end up, they may join the bandwagon, and I would hope that they do. But I think it's going to be a decentralized, distributed, grassroots effort from the different protest groups. We actually had calls about a year ago with Extinction Rebellion, and you know, we haven't moved much further than that with them. They're doing great work, but again, it's like they're basically fighting to get a seat at the table, whereas we want to create a whole new table, okay? And so we think that you're basically asking disempowered governments that are literally incapable of solving our problems to solve our problems. That's kind of the way I see it. And we need to start doing it ourselves. And the Black Lives Matters movement is a great example of how we can really start doing that with the peaceful warriors, the boots on the ground from the different, if we get all the different protest movements reignited, like, you know, Standing Rock, Occupy Wall Street, etc. You know, the climate strike. Now there's rent strikes and mortgage strikes that they're planning. And so this is it's going to continue to blossom the way I think, because the conditions are not going away. They're going to get worse. So if we can, what we're not wanting to do is recreate the wheel over and over again. We've experienced that firsthand with the World Summit. So we don't give a damn if the World Summit is the one holding the flag to save the day. You know, let's just drop all that stuff. And, you know, we had a hard time getting groups to organize because they were focused on their own projects, a lot of which were focusing on symptoms, right? And they were worried about funding. You know, how are we going to get money to do this? And then what we noticed is time and time again, everybody sort of recreates the wheel over and over again, right? And so we're trying to basically just drop all that stuff. Let's get busy, and we can do it under Hack Humanity, or we can do it under Black Lives Matter. I don't care. Let's just get all these different protest groups to come together and work on the superordinate goal, which is meeting everybody's basic needs. ASAP, within 3 to 4 months, and thereafter, because that's what we're going to need.
Yeah, those three groups, the protest groups, the consciousness groups that are mostly at this one, and the systems change thinkers groups, bring them all.
Right.
Yeah. And maybe to add, I mean, we're not saying, and we mentioned before, that all politicians are bad. There are a lot of people who really mean well, but they're restricted. They can only do so much within the current systems, okay? So I'm pretty sure that those membranes are also opening from governance and from companies, that they are willing to be open, to be a part of the solution. And we need everybody. We are all part of this solution. So yeah, we're pretty careful about going into these dogmatic circles. On the other hand, I do want to acknowledge the value of these reinventing the wheel over and over again, because it's always a learning curve for all of us. So we probably all have had to go through this process to come to a point where we are now, when we are ready on the level of consciousness to make the evolution step, the next step.
Wow, thanks guys. Your vision is truly inspiring, clear, and grounded, and just that superordinate goal of meeting people's basic needs, I think, can just so clearly and obviously resonate with everyone. And I'm kind of inspired to sing a song that came to me that sort of seems to sum this up a bit. I was wondering if I could have your kind of permission to do that.
Of course.
Yeah. I'm not the world's best singer, but I'm having this project where I'm really letting like songs kind of flow through me. So, but yeah, so I'll just try it. I'm being a bit courageous here just to see if I can do that. So
go for it.
Yeah. We have the power. We have the tools. No more dictators, no more military military rule. I won't give thee taxes to pass to a fool. No more dictators, no more military rule. 'Cause it's our time now, we're going to a new school. We know how to organize, and we know what to do. We're walking home to the beat of our drums. We're walking home. We're walking home to the beat of our drums. We're walking home where we belong. So
Thanks, Cara. It's coming from the heart. It's beautiful.
I bless you and your project.
Thank you, and thank you for everything that you are doing. And yeah, it was great. Really.
Well, and I feel like that's really the strength is being able, is that sort of, you know, that what the power of Occupy Wall Street, when you came in there, no matter what your cause was, you felt you were part of the change and the solution. It doesn't matter whether, I mean, you go to all the, like the Left Forum, all these socialist different groups, and it would be clicked off. It's like, only this thing matters. And like you were saying, like fighting for a seat at the table, when the table was always an illusion and always a false proxy around where the real power is. And so I'm very interested in the sort of the new models and the humility and confidence and that blend.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you mentioned in the chat about rebel wisdom. Yeah, I'd absolutely give thumbs up to those guys. And there, as I mentioned, there's a whole slew of thought leaders that are really coming up with some pretty amazing radical stuff that just makes sense in a world that doesn't make sense. And so it's and some of it just seems so obvious, like you said, Kara, earlier. It's like, do we really have to say this? Yeah, we do.
We do, yeah. We really do, yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So that's, yeah, this whole Game B community is interesting. I'm also watching that develop, and there's some old attachments maybe to existing paradigm ideas that crop up and cause polarities and, you know, problems. And so, but yeah, what we're pointing to, this superordinate goal should be, it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or Democrat, you know, do you want to feed your children? You know, do you want a safe environment and a house, a roof over your head, etc.? That should be something that we can all come together on.
Well, and the inclusion of all the other goals with when all of us have our needs met, then we're actually able to have that conversation, and it's not a power game and the artifice is removed when our needs are met. We don't have to get someone to like us to make sure that we're going to have a place to sleep and eat, and I think there's something really powerful about that radical inclusion and radical honesty that is completely excised from the existing institutions that have circumscribe their externalities and their profit sharers and so forth, and having new models that actually are necessarily integrated and therefore reflecting the actual reality that we're in, that everything is interconnected, is, I think, our strength.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's amazing that humans are as good as we are, despite the fact that we have all these rivalrous competitive dynamics that put us against each other. Holy shit, we still don't cut each other off in the grocery store queue or the line, you know? It's like, you know, so there's all these things that we do to help each other out despite being incentivized against doing that.
How can we connect with you guys outside of this? I saw a link earlier, so maybe I don't know if you have regular calls or however the right way to interface with the World Summit efforts.
Appreciate that. Hackhumanity.net, and then from there you can find you know, some links to our Facebook group. We've got WorldSummit .global, and that's still active, and you know, we're doing stuff there, but it's actually, we're trying to sort of redirect more of the activity towards Hack Humanity. But there's, yeah, so we've got a YouTube channel for World Summit. You can, well, and you'll find we have some other slide decks like Humanity's Phase Shift.
Yeah.
And where is that? Where can they find that?
Well, I can share the Synergy Hub portal or the portal, the World Summit portal that's on the Synergy Hub Network's website. But you also can send an email to unity@worldsummit.global, and whatever you send in will be answered. And then we can connect to have a Zoom call and yeah, to talk about stuff.
Fantastic. I look forward to chiming in wherever I can and keep up the great work. Know that, you know, we have the future generations and Mother Gaia and all the species who can speak for us included, even when we say, you know, all humans' basic needs met, where those of us who are the apex species could actually be better of service and do the great work. Bless.
Yeah, that's a good
Thank
point.
you.
Yeah, I think it needs to be a given that we take care of all the animals and trees and plants because they take care of us meeting our basic needs, right?
Yep.
Not everyone's ready to hear every message at once.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all.
Good. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a really inspiring dialogue. So blessings to you all.
All right.
Thank you. It was great.